Welcome to this explainer. Today we're going to explore a really fascinating concept: how organizations defend themselves from chaos, simple errors, and outright fraud. Honestly, you can think of it a lot like a biological immune system. Just as our bodies have these incredibly complex networks working silently in the background to fight off infections, businesses have elaborate structures designed to detect threats, fight off fraud, and maintain total order. So let's dive right into this by asking a pretty high-stakes question. How does a massive company prevent its own employees from stealing it blind? I know it sounds a bit dramatic, but businesses literally face the constant threat of human error and malicious intent every single day. A company without defenses is incredibly vulnerable. So how do they survive and thrive? Well, that's exactly what we're going to unpack. All right, Section 1, the business immune system, defending the organization. To really understand our corporate immune system, we have to look at the operational standard that defines it, which is known as internal control. And it's not just about accounting or crunching numbers. It is the whole system of controls, financial and otherwise, that management establishes. The ultimate goal here is to carry on the business in an orderly, efficient way, making sure everyone is actually adhering to management policies, safeguarding the assets, and ensuring that all records are perfectly complete and accurate. It's essentially an all-embracing safety net for the entire operation. Now, the crucial thing to take away here is that these four objectives are basically the vital signs of any healthy organization. If a business is functioning efficiently, following its own rules, protecting its assets, and keeping accurate records, then its immune system is working. Auditors rely heavily on these four pillars. When they come in for a health check, they're looking to see if these systems are robust enough to prevent and detect material misstatements, errors, or any kind of fraud.
Moving on to Section 2, Anatomy of the Defenses. Layers of protection.
These daily defense mechanisms, our corporate antibodies, if you will, come in a lot of different flavors. They range from the very physical, like actual locks on a warehouse door, because hey, sometimes low tech is the best tech, to organizational controls, like having very clear lines of reporting. You've also got authorization controls, meaning a specific manager has to approve credit sales, and arithmetical controls, which is essentially just checking the math and balancing the books. Even the people you hire act as a control. Having competent, well-trained personnel and proper supervision ensures the whole system operates exactly how it's supposed to.
Now, here's a truly fascinating defense mechanism: the concept of segregation of duties. Think of this as a structural firewall within the business. The golden rule here is absolutely crucial. No one single person should ever be responsible for recording and processing a complete transaction from start to finish. By separating the initiation, authorization, execution, custody, and recording of a transaction across several different people, you drastically reduce the risk of intentional manipulation. Plus, it naturally increases the chances of someone catching an accidental error along the way.
Okay, Section 3, testing for weak spots, the auditor's toolkit. So how do auditors actually map out these defenses? They generally use two main tools. First, you have narrative notes, which are exactly what they sound like, written descriptions. They're great for simple systems handled by just a few people, but in a massive, complex corporation, they become an absolute nightmare to update, and it's way too easy to miss a glaring loophole. Flowcharts, on the other hand, map the entire system visually. It instantly highlights where a control exists, or dangerously, where one is totally missing. Sure, they take some time to drop, but they present the system in its complete totality without losing any detail. To really probe for weaknesses, auditors use an internal control questionnaire, or ICQ for short. The brilliance here is in its pure simplicity. The questions are designed so that you only need a simple yes or no answer. For instance, are goods from suppliers inspected on arrival? If yes, awesome. But if the answer is no, the auditor instantly knows there was a critical gap in the system where paying for missing or damaged goods is a huge risk. It's an incredibly efficient, rapid-fire diagnostic tool. Okay, let's just pause here for a second because this is a vital reality check. Any instituted internal control system provides management with only reasonable but not absolute assurance. No system is foolproof, guys. No matter how perfectly you design your corporate immune system, it has its kryptonite. You can never, ever guarantee absolute perfection. So what exactly is that kryptonite? Well, auditors call these inherent limitations. Sometimes the raw cost of implementing a control is just way more expensive than the potential loss it's preventing. But the real viruses that bypass the strongest defenses are behavioral. Things like human error, simple carelessness, fatigue, distraction. Then there is management override, which is when a boss abuses their authority to just bypass the rules entirely. And perhaps the most dangerous of all, collusion. If two or more people team up to bypass the system, even the absolute best segregation of duties is going to fail. Which brings us to Section 4, Controls in the Real World, Daily Operations. Think about what a business actually does on a day-to-day basis. They handle cash, they pay wages, they buy materials, they sell products, and they manage inventory. These are known as the key control risk areas. Every single time a customer pays an invoice, a paycheck is cut, or inventory is stocked on a shelf, specific controls absolutely must be engaged to prevent a disaster. If controls fail in even one of these areas, the financial health of the entire entity is on the line. Let's take wages and salaries as a highly relatable example. The disaster of a stolen payroll or paying ghost employees is a classic age-old fraud scheme. So how do you stop it? The payroll defense is elegantly simple. You just ensure that the person who prepares the pay sheet is completely independent from the person who actually hands out the cash or authorizes the bank transfer. This simple separation is a highly effective real-world control. But you might be wondering, what if you're a small business? In a small entity with only a handful of employees, you literally just don't have enough people to properly segregate all those duties. So the system has to adapt. Instead of formal, thick-written codes, smaller entities rely heavily on a strong culture of integrity. And crucially, direct management oversight steps in to replace that formal segregation. The owner or manager is in the trenches, actively monitoring the daily operations, creating an informal yet highly effective immune system that's perfectly tailored to their size. All right, final stretch. Section 5, the ultimate watchdogs, internal audit and public sector assurance. First, we really need to distinguish between the two different types of watchdogs. Internal auditors are actual employees working within the entity. They serve management, constantly monitoring those daily controls we talked about and recommending improvements. But at the end of the day, they aren't truly independent. External auditors, however, are independent outsiders appointed specifically to give the final, sole opinion on the financial statements. The external auditor might look at the internal auditor's work, sure, but the ultimate responsibility for that final health check rests squarely on the external auditor's shoulders. Now, when we scale this up to the public sector, the stakes are literally the funds of an entire nation. Here, the 1999 Constitution establishes the ultimate external auditor, the Auditor General for the Federation. The protections put in place to ensure their total independence are massive. They're appointed by the president but have to be confirmed by the Senate, and they can only be removed by a 2/3 Senate majority. They are granted unrestricted, free access to all government files, safes, and documents at all reasonable times. And most importantly, they are not subject to the direction or control of any other authority or person. They are the supreme, impartial force ensuring government funds are properly spent. And to make sure this public assurance actually happens, the law dictates a very strict timeline. It flows like this. First, the Accountant General prepares the financial statements. Second, those statements are handed over to the Auditor General. Third, the Auditor General has exactly 90 days from receipt to submit their audit reports to the National Assembly. And finally, the National Assembly's Public Accounts Committee formally considers those reports. It's a highly structured, democratic mechanism of accountability. Well, we've covered a ton of ground today, from the basic roles of segregating duties all the way up to the supreme audit institutions of an entire nation. Knowing how human error, management override, and outright fraud are constantly testing an organization's immune system, I want to leave you with this to consider about your own daily operations. Are the controls in your workplace a true fail-safe or just an illusion? Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer.